Ah, making a video. Didn't hear any beeping noise though. Weird. Anyway, so the camera seems to be running. So we'll go with it, right? It seems to be working.
Hello everyone. A couple of days
Zombie
ago I
picture
received
show.
this email. Said that if I was interested in increasing the size of my... You know what, that's not the email that I'm thinking about. The email that...
Whatever, okay. Another joke guy. So anyway, zombie picture show. So, I shouldn't even bother, but, he does make a couple of accusations, and I just figured I'll point out how he's just a huge hypocrite. So anyway, and he just does make, I'm not going to bother with the second half of the video because it's just all nonsense. But anyway, so he's refuting the drunk driving antinatalism metaphor. And he's basically saying that first off, he's minimizing the amount of harm done. And he's basically saying, who cares? It's this tiny percentage that is failure, in terms of procreation. And it's okay with him. So he'll decide for us how many is okay. And so I always go back to, I love the Star Trek, there's always, you can always find a Star Trek reference for any argument. And so there's this Star Trek movie, whatever one it was, where the world where they could live forever, and there was only 600 of them, the Buku or whatever the hell they were, and whatever. And so Picard's making this argument, like, how many does it matter? Is it 600 or 6,000 or 6 million? I mean, how many people are going to be your metaphorical Jews to persecute? And so for him, 1 million people committing suicide's okay. Let's say it's 10 times that number of people who wish they had the courage to commit suicide. That's okay. Plus, we already know statistically where most of the babies are being born, which he even concedes, which is in shit, and that's okay. So he'll tell us that it's all okay, that it's all right to impose. And he's just, again, going to run away from this simple word, impose, and not take any responsibility for it. And he's going to do it in a slimy way, too, where he keeps using this number, 41% of births are accidents. And that's a pile of shit, okay? They're not accidents. They're accidents on purpose. He seems to think that because somebody's not deliberately trying to have a kid, that they're intentionally trying not to have a kid. And that's not what they're doing. Okay, the 41% who are having kids because they aren't doing anything to prevent themselves from having kids. So the fact that they're having kids, not on purpose, but pretty much on purpose, right? I mean, you can't deny that if you don't do anything to stop yourself from getting pregnant, you will eventually get pregnant. That's the likelihood. And so it's certainly not an accident when you know it can happen and you do nothing to prevent it. That's not an accident. But anyway, so he's just full of shit. And so he says, I'll play some of it so you can hear some of his accusations, and I'll refute his accusations.
Thinking about was a couple of days ago.
Blah, blah, blah.
User, a subscriber friend of mine, just sent it, and really talented musician, really funny and really intelligent. And I'm not going to say her channel, her name, because I don't want others to harass her. The reason why that...
Yeah, whatever. You sort of gotta give it away in some ways, right? Musician. It's got to be forever with film, right? She plays the, what the hell that is, the accordion or something? Yeah, she's a great accordion player. So yeah, it's got to be her. Really, how many chicks are there that are musicians that we know? Let's go through the list, right?
And this is because I'm going to be talking about
blah, blah, blah.
So
no,
I don't
you're
want
not.
others to harass her. Because she said, check out this video and tell me if it makes sense to you. I clicked on this video, and it was by an individual who I really don't like, cannot stand. So it was really, felt a little antsy just watching him, and I feel a little apprehensive making a video.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, he's going to say my name anyway, right? So he goes through all this crap just not to get... Yeah, I don't like you, you don't like me. That's right. I think you're absolutely full of shit. At least half the time. But go ahead. Yeah, you make jet fuel out of seawater. Okay, yeah, I believe that. I don't really. You made good investment choices. Yeah, I believe that. No, I don't really believe that.
response. I'm not going to make a video response to this because he will take one sentence that I say and blow it out of proportion, and he will rant.
Okay, now watch what he does here in this video, right? He takes my words where I say real probability, realistic probability. And he just keeps playing with these words and just ignoring the context in which I said it, which was recognizing the fact that if you're a drunk driver, you can't go by the fact that, oh, I got away with it. I've been drinking and driving for years and I never had an accident. Well, that doesn't mean anything because the real probability is going to, inevitably it gets realized in the real world. Statistics are real. They're not fake. Okay? They're real. And your personal experience doesn't undo reality. And your hope doesn't undo reality. And wishful thinking doesn't undo reality. Okay? Statistical reality is going to show up. You can wish that your kid not be born with its brain outside of its skull, but inevitably a certain number of kids are going to be born that way, and your wishing has nothing to do with reality.
For maybe 10 fucking minutes on that fucking sentence alone.
Yeah.
Really, who the fuck has time?
You,
really. So
buddy.
That's why I don't address him anymore.
Fuck you.
I'm talking about Amanda. Just say no, kids.
Yeah, you don't address him anymore, and you just slander him instead, you fucking cunt. And do it like a man instead of being a pussy about it. Fucker. Hypocrite.
On this, and it's a video response to Ludai Returns, an individual who I particularly find breviously cheeky.
Whatever.
Which I kind of like.
Whatever.
So anyway, in this video, he said that we're all victims because our consent was...
That's not what I said. So again, so fuck you. Alright? If you're going to misparaphrase me, you don't have the balls to play my video, or you don't have the balls to actually write down a note that's actually a correct quote. Alright? I never said we're all victims. So that's just crap. Alright? What I said is there's inevitable probabilistic outcomes, and that's why we say you can't drink and drive. It's because we know probabilistically a certain negative effect will be realized in the real world. And it doesn't matter whether you think you're above it or not. The fact is you're probably not. You're probably just waiting for the statistic to hit you in the face with the telephone pole or tree or family of 4.
Violated upon. Because we weren't given consent, so ergo it's a violation. It's a clear violation, and ergo that makes us victims.
Again, that's not the argument, right? I'm clearly saying that the assholes who say, okay, I like the fun ride, well, fuck you, okay? Then you get what you deserve. What I'm saying, though, is that we know that a certain percentage are not going to like it, and that we know that when you have a baby, it grows into an adult human being, and that it will have an opinion, and that its opinion is not being appreciated before you're choosing to have the kid. And the fact is, we know what those opinions are going to... We know what the outcome's going to be. Just like with drunk driving, we know the outcome. We know failure is inevitable, that there will be people who will find your decision to be obnoxious and disgusting to their welfare and their interests, and that's just a fact, and you have to account for that fact. And so therefore you have to justify with more than your convenience why you think you have the right to violate that percentage of people who will feel violated, who will feel fundamentally raped by your pure, disgusting, selfish judgment.
Think about this. In order for you to come to that conclusion, you have to assume first that consent needs to be given. A consent needs...
Yeah, well, you have to assume that it's sort of an important decision whether or not you're going to create life. Like, yes, you have to assume that it's like probably pretty high on the playing God list. Like it might be the first thing on the what do gods do list. Might be creating life. So yeah, that is kind of an important thing that you should take. That comes with a hell of a lot of responsibility and obligation. That it's like next to killing people, it's about the most significant thing you can do in the world. There's not too many other things you can do other than, something violent or brutal. that's more in somebody's face than giving birth to them. Duh. Yes, duh, that's the assumption, fuckhead.
To be given on an actuality, and the consent needs to be given on something that happens by accident.
It doesn't happen by accident. So there we go. So that's his argument. His argument is these are all crashes. Nobody can stop a birth from happening. It's fundamentally impossible. All these people that have 2 kids or 3 kids and then stop having kids, even though they're fully reproductive, they're all breaking the laws of physics somehow. They're performing some sort of miraculous magic trick that nobody else can perform. It's completely impossible not to have birth accidents. The accidents cannot be mitigated against. It's impossible to mitigate against the accidents. So therefore, consent is not possible because you can't violate consent because they're all catastrophic accidents that cannot be prevented. Bullshit.
Happenstance of this biology. So a consent needs to be given. Yeah, 50% of people decide to have children, make a conscious choice to have children. 50%. 41% is just an accident. And
bullshit. So again, that's just absolute bullshit, okay? Because people don't say on the form or when they're called up on the telephone, yes, we deliberately tried to have a baby. Again, that doesn't mean that they didn't have the full expectation that they were inevitably going to have kids. Because yes, you have sex without protection, without any attempt to disrupt the biology, you will get pregnant. That's likely to happen unless you are infertile. So if you're normally healthy, you're going to get pregnant if you do nothing to mitigate against it. And you have sex. I mean, that's just a fact. So those people did in fact have kids on purpose because they did nothing to prevent it.
10% either decide to abort it or miscarry it or what the fuck ever. But that's the chance we give. So those 41% per se are the ones that are violated upon.
Well, we know that it's a rare woman that has 18 kids, right? And we know that that's kind of what she's capable of, all right? Is that women can, as a practical matter, a woman can probably fart out 20 of these little things if she does absolutely nothing to prevent it and, has an aggressive sex life. And women don't do that, right? Even the ones that have kids stop. And they must stop through some sort of mechanism, correct? So we can concede that these accidents are not accidents, that they are in fact things that people allow to happen because they just couldn't give a rat's ass to stop it. Not the same thing.
In all actuality, in reality. Because they weren't given or they weren't asked for the consent. Now, in order for you to come to that conclusion, you must assume that a consent needs to be asked for.
Well, it's not the point is that when you're not able to get consent, like say the woman's unconscious, then you have to have a good reason to think she's made it clear to you that it's okay for you to undress her and rape her, let's say. So she said it explicitly beforehand, if I go unconscious, yes, you may indulge all you like because it's fine with me. So you have to have good reason, okay, to do something when you don't have consent. You have to be sure, if I'm going to go to Las Vegas with somebody else's money, I have to be sure this is what they want and that the outcome is going to be what they're expecting. Okay, I can't have the expectation that I just take their money without their consent and I waste it or squander it or lose it and then just show up and say, too bad, you lose, fuck you. Yeah, see, I have to have good reason to think they would trust me. That I would have reason to think my judgment's better than their judgment. That I should have the right to supersede their judgment or that I should have the right to act in their judgment. And you wouldn't do that in any other circumstance. Would you assume to do that unless you knew the person? You wouldn't go into the hospital and start making decisions for people even though you didn't know who they were and what they believed in. You wouldn't start saying, well, that one wants to live and that one doesn't, and that one wants extraordinary care, this one. You wouldn't do that. No, you would take the care to know who those people were and what they believed in, and you'd try to act in their interest. And I'm just saying, if you're going to try to understand what's going to happen when you have a kid, you have to account for the fact that what if. You have to do the what if thing, and you have to have answers for the what if. So what if the kid is smarter than me? What if the kid does say, I don't like your system, I don't like the world you live in, I think you're all a bunch of shit eaters, I think you're ignorant motherfucking cunts. What if your kid grows up to say that to your fucking face? What's going to be your reaction? What are you going to say to that child that you've imposed upon? And if you don't have words and you don't have anything to say except fuck you, well then you probably shouldn't be stealing consent.
And if it wasn't given, it's a violation, so you are the victim. So the incident says that you have to ask first in order for the consequence to be given.
Now, the argument in the video was clearly made that you can't get consent. So you have to have good reason to act without consent. That's the argument being made. It's a fact that you can't get consent. It's a fact that you now have to have good reason to act in somebody else's interest. It almost has to be a guarantee that what you're going to give them is a real gift and not a fake gift. That it's the real deal, because you're going to be acting in their interest. And that's the argument being made, that if you're going to be arrogant, if you're going to override somebody's consent, that you better do it with one hell of a fucking argument. And my argument to you assholes is that you don't have one hell of a fucking argument. All you have is I'm a selfish asshole and I'll do whatever the fuck I want. And I don't fucking care. That's all you have is a fucking argument, and it fucking sucks.
Common sense. But since this baby cannot do any of that because it lacks the capability.
Well, let's understand again, you are not giving birth to a baby in the sense that it will not remain a baby. It will grow into a fully maturated, mature human being with reasonable expectation, and that is the individual you have to account for and account to. You will have to account to the adult you create, not the baby you create. It will not stay a baby. I mean, that's like saying you can go ahead and buy you can have a pet cat and you can have a little tiny bed for the little tiny kitten, and you never have to accept the fact that it's going to grow up and it's going to need a bigger bed and it's going to need bigger food and bigger dishes and bigger cat boxes and all that kind of stuff, because it's going to mature into a real cat, not just a little kitten.
But think about this. In order for you to come to that conclusion, you have to assume first that
I'll jump back.
41% per se.
Alright, jump ahead.
Is it a violation of consent still? If you cannot form a thought, is it a violation of consent still?
Yeah, so your argument is if the woman's unconscious, you all of a sudden can just assume she's unconscious forever, that she'll never wake up, and so you can do whatever the fuck you want. No, the rational conclusion is that yes, there's points where something isn't able to give their permission, and there's points where somebody will be able to give their permission. And so you can just look at a baby as, yes, okay, when you first have the kid, it's basically in a coma, but eventually it's going to come out of the coma and it's going to be a human being, and you have to take responsibility for the human being it's going to be, not for what it is when you first conceive it. Okay, you don't have a zygote, you don't have a fertilized egg, you don't have any of that shit. Okay, what you have is a human being eventually, and that's what you have to account for. It's the whole game, not just the fucking one. You don't just sit there and say that the whole game is the first inning, because it's not.
Mendham said that you cannot violate something that hasn't been formed yet.
I just said it as a concession to the argument. The fact is that you can't get consent. It's a fact of the circumstance. And then I fucking pointed out quite clearly in the video that this is a big problem, and that procreators have to take the responsibility for that problem. And responsibility means that they have to account for the arrogance of them acting in the interest of the thing they can't get consent from. So they're going to act without consent. That means they have to have a higher order of competence and certainty that what they're doing is the correct thing to do. Unless they have that confidence, for good fucking reason, then I'm arguing they have no right. All right. If you're going to override something's consent, are you going to dismiss the necessity of getting consent because of the fact that you can't get it? You're going to have good fucking reason to act in somebody else's in a way that's going to impact somebody else's welfare. Again, if somebody goes into a coma and you take responsibility for their life and their finances, don't you understand that you have a high responsibility to do the right thing for them? If you just steal their money, would somebody say you're a good human being? No, they'd say you're a motherfucking cunt.
This is true. You cannot violate something that hasn't been formed yet. But we can actually think, well, okay, what makes life? Is the first breath of air that you draw, is this considered a human being? Or is the fetus considered a human being? And where's the line drawn? And there's a clear distinction, by the way, that life is made when that first breath is drawn, when he is, or the baby is, in this playing field of existence. He is considered a human being. That is the
let's not argue this arbitrary crap, okay? That's an irrelevant distinction. It's a human being when it has the capacities that bestow us, the personality, character traits that endow us with some kind of specialness compared to animals. But it'd be silly to sit there and say that it is something special just because it popped out of a vagina. The only thing that means is it's not a parasite anymore. But that's all it means.
And the rest are just argumentative semantics. But this baby cannot give consent because cannot, by logic. He hasn't been formed yet. His brain hasn't been actually formed yet. It's still forming, so he cannot give consent. But an answer needs to be like, hey, maybe we're saying that he has to give consent. And if he cannot give consent, and if you do it for him, then that's a violation of his consent. Then we're talking about the baby's rights, a fetus rights. Do babies have rights?
Well, again, we're talking about the adult that's going to be a byproduct of that circumstance. So again, it's an idiotic. To limit it, to say that people have babies is stupid. What they have is children, you could almost argue, but what they have is human beings. They replicate. They create human beings. They do not create babies.
But he wasn't talking about that, right? He said in his video that he's just talking about realistic probabilities. Stop that for a minute. Realistic probabilities.
Yeah, so this isn't playing a word game, asshole? You didn't even play my video, so at least I have the decency to play your video before I play a fucking word game, and here you are talking about how, oh, and Mendham's so annoying because he takes some little words and then spends 10 minutes. Look at what you're doing here. Realistic probabilities, blah, blah, blah. Playing a fucking word game because I merely wanted to point out that probability is a fact. Statistics are a fact. So we do know what the outcome is going to be. We do know what the facts are in terms of the risk imposed. So there is no, I'm going to pretend that my children will be 100% immune from having any kind of disorder that might render them capable of finding me a disgusting asshole. Right? Isn't that what the average parent is basically doing? Just pretending, oh, my kids couldn't possibly think I'm an ignorant motherfucking pig. Yes, they could possibly do that. That's going to be a fact. They will grow up saying, you're a disgusting whore, bitch. That's a realistic, real-world outcome. And it's one these assholes who have kids don't account for.
Realistic probabilities. Figure that out. It'll come to you in a minute. Realistic probabilities. Probable means a chance of an event happening or occurring.
No, it means the inevitability of an event occurring if you have enough permutations. Quite obviously, there's enough permutations, okay? If there was just one birth event, your probability thing is wide open because any one of the outcomes could be possible and you couldn't really predict which one it's going to be because you're only buying one ticket, so to speak, in the lottery. But we know if you have the full volume of tickets purchased that there will inevitably be a winner if you buy or sell enough tickets into the lottery. It's inevitable, and there's going to be a certain proportion of outcomes, okay, if you have enough permutations. So obviously with birth there are enough permutations. Like with drunk driving, there's plenty of examples. There'll be 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 incidences of drunk driving per year, and you'll have the outcomes that are commensurate with those incidences. And that's why you get the statistical outcomes. Shit for brains.
Not actual, but maybe.
No, again, it's inevitable. With enough permutations, the outcomes are inevitably achieved.
Probabilities. Not realistic probabilities, but just probabilities. Probable means a chance of something happening. Not actual, but maybe.
Again, it doesn't mean that, so you're wrong. Yeah, you're just fucking wrong. Alright? It's all dependent on permutations. Permutations. A word absent, okay, from your vernacular on the subject. Fuckwit.
Not yet realistic. So realistic probabilities is just an oxymoronic statement.
No. Your inability to understand the concept of permutations is moronic. How oxidized your moronicery is, well, we don't know that for sure. But I'd say it's pretty oxidized. You have a rusty brain.
But that's just me.
Yeah,
but
fuck
I could actually
you.
say, in all actuality, I can talk about life in a mathematical form because it's, as I said, probabilities, right? Mendham says it's realistic probabilities, so let's talk about realistic probabilities.
Yeah, let's do that.
So life is a mathematical form. Minimum,
yes, let's
maximum,
do that.
speed, velocity, and change.
Oh, shut up.
Or every organic matter
Get
gives
to it,
off speed,
fuckwit.
heat, and temperature, right?
Get to
delta
it.
G, delta H,
Oh,
T,
delta,
S.
delta,
G is
fuck
the shenanigans
you.
occurring.
Shenanigans is the whole fucking video is shenanigans.
Delta H.
Get to it already.
Entropy is the chance of a bond making.
Oh, fuck you. I'm pretending I know some science.
Make it or break.
Yeah, keep pretending.
So once, if it makes, it will give out that sort of temperature that we ever saw.
Blah, 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 blah,
that
blah,
sort
blah,
of
blah, 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 blah,
transfer of the temperature. And if that is the case, holy fuck, that temperature will soon die off.
Oh, whatever. Do you want to get to the probabilities, please?
And become delta S. It will reach a state of entropy. So that is the probability. The probability of life is to reach that conclusion. The actuality of life is to reach that finality.
Yeah. What's the actuality, right? So what is the correlation between poverty and IQ? And then what is the correlation between people of lower IQ, right, combining and having a child, and what's its destiny, probabilistically? Yeah, we know what it is.
Entropy. So, the argument is all about, it's neither harm nor this, it's all about the probability. Not the actuality, but the probability of...
No, it's the actuality, jackass. What's the inevitable outcome with enough permutations?
harm. So, life is probability. So, what is the function of dy over dx?
Oh, shut up.
And you will find, if you find this function, you will find that derivative, or the function of set life. And you will find that function of that probability. For example,
Oh, here we go.
and this is just mathematical thought.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
example,
please get to it.
7 billion people.
Right.
7 billion people in the planet. 1.4 million people, 1.5 million people decide to opt out, commit suicide. The probability of you opting out is about 0.014%.
Right, per year. So if you're going to do it as a individual person statistic, you have to recognize that it's that percentage per year of your life. So that over a lifetime, the percentage is larger than that, quite obviously. But irrelevant to the argument, okay? In my video, I even brought this up and I said, look, we know 1 million people commit suicide. So we know for every one of those ones that does commit suicide, I said, let's say at least 10, okay, want to be dead. And that maybe even 100 for every one of those people would say, hey, I'd rather not have bothered with this bullshit. Yeah, it's not bad enough to go blow my brains out, but I'd rather not have been. Okay, my mother was a skanky, stupid, ignorant fucking whore, and my father was a useless drunk. Or whatever the, descriptors are. They were ignorant. They made a mistake. They didn't think about what they did, and I could basically say fuck you to them for that. Alright, there's lots of people that would draw that conclusion. So that number gets into real hundreds of millions, if not billions of people who would say, look, if I could, cork it before it happened, I probably would. I wouldn't do this again at minimum. Lots of people might say that one. I'd rather not do a repeat.
Yeah. That is the probability of you opting out. 0.01%. 0.014%. And the hardest way to go out is ischemic heart disease, right? That is the hardest. 12.7 million people die every year of this shit worldwide. So what is the probability of that? The probability of that, you succumbing to that, will be 0.018%.
Yeah, well, again, it's just silly. Per year. So add up those percentages over a lifetime, and there's a 100% chance you're going to die of something. And that's the truth, okay? 100.00% chance that you will die of something.
That you will succumb to this. So the probability of you succumbing to these harms is acceptable. In the grand scheme of things.
Says you. Right. So you're going to decide how many victims there should be. So how many? Why don't you tell me how many people... what's the acceptable number of people catastrophically life-ruined kind of thing? Either cancer or some other kind of death. From, like, say, nuclear power plant accidents. What's the acceptable number of casualties for everything that we have in society? You tell me what the acceptable number of casualties is. And then we can go on to what the acceptable birth circumstances are. Because we know most kids are born in fucking poverty, right? Horrific poverty. So there's a huge percentage chance of them living, without a college education. You're even going to bring up this, and well, I should play the rest of this. I might as well play it. Just
grand scheme of the realistic probability, it's okay for you to be harmed in this way because the probability, it's okay.
Fuck you.
Right? For example, if my parents were born in, say, if my parents were Chinese in China, I would be born in China. I will be born in that point, or rather, I will be born in that 1.3 billion country state, where famine, poverty is more probable than, say, in the States here in the United States. It's more probable in China. But this country, China, is more technologically advanced than, say, India with this 1.2 billion inhabitants. Poverty is a lot worse off than China. So ideally...
Says you. Yeah, I mean, realistically, says you. I think it depends on whether you get, where you live in China. But I mean, I don't know if the Chinese peasants are doing any better than the Indian peasants, frankly. But regardless, you want to have a poor person competition. The point is that most people are being born in circumstances that you wouldn't want to. Us in the West, anyway. Me as a civilized human, I'm damn grateful I'm not being born in those shit circumstances. I certainly wouldn't endorse it because I certainly wouldn't want to live their life. So what else can I possibly say? If it was my consent, I would not concede. I would not give you consent to give birth to me in poverty. I would not give people consent to do that to me. I mean, I wouldn't give them consent to have me in a penthouse either, but regardless.
I am a lot better off in China than my other Asian counterparts.
Again, the argument's already been made. I'm not going to. There's no point in playing it further. Look, we know that most kids are born out of stupidity and in poverty. So stupidity and poverty. That's that's what the generator of most births in the world. All right. And we know that most civilized country, the more civilized they are, the better off they are. They have zero or negative native population growth, and it's only through importing ignorance and stupidity that they maintain their population growth. And that's just the truth. So yeah, that's the reality. The reality is that the only thing maintaining human existence is ignorance and poverty. If it wasn't for those two factors, all right, playing together to create irresponsible and reckless replication, we would have declining population because most people don't find it necessary. They don't find it compelling to sufficiently to procreate at a level high enough to maintain existence, compensating for the individuals who choose not to procreate at all. So antinatalism has already won in terms of behavior in civilized countries, and all it has to do is win in terms of perception, to change more, to create policy that'll affect behavior on a wider scale. Because obviously no one's stopping the recklessly poor from having kids now, and the people who could stop them aren't doing it because they don't have any volition. They don't see any necessity. And that needs to change, quite obviously. Because you're not going to change their behavior unless you change their behavior, unless you force them to change with either changing their incentives or changing their behavior through education or something. But anyway, fuck you. Yeah, you suck. The end. Enough.